know that 3 years ago, APRA, who are the financial regulators, perhaps ill-advisedly, am I allowed to say that, decided to tighten interest rates and credit for or through the banks for investors. They were concerned that there was too much investment, particularly in the Sydney market, and if interest rates rose, that would leave investors exposed. So they decided to, I guess, take the heat out of investor demand. Up went rates, down went investors. Now, at the time, of course, we did have very strong investor activity in Sydney. In fact, in New South Wales, the proportion of investor activity had moved into record levels of 65% of all lending. Now, that has tracked backwards, and current levels in New South Wales are now down to 48%. So you think, oh, 48% from 65%, but 48% is actually around the long-term average of investor activity. So given all that tightening of credit, we still have an appetite. Investors still have an appetite in the Sydney market for investment properties. This has always been the most in-demand market from investors of all of the capital cities. And even given all those higher rates and restrictive lending that we've had directed to investors, New South Wales makes up nearly 50% of all investor lending in the country, and locally in New South Wales, of all lending for residences, for residential purposes, investors still make up nearly 50% of the market. So the appetite is still there for investors, and why wouldn't it be? Because this market is such a resilient and robust market, and if any market's a blue chip market, it's the Sydney market, and investors don't really need to be convinced to get into this market in the medium to longer term. So all those demand issues are certainly very positive, and there's one more that's even more positive, and that's this economy. Why are we not celebrating the Sydney economy? This is the strongest economy in the country. Do you know the latest unemployment rate has fallen to 4.2%, which is the lowest of all the state capitals, and next year, with the trends continuing, we will see an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it. And that is now approaching record low levels of unemployment, and what we could perhaps say is full employment. So this is fabulous. So if you're worried about interest rates, forget it. If you're worried that the market's not affordable, forget it. First home buyers are moving in like the Marines. And if you're worried about having a job, well, forget that too, because there's so much work around. And usually they're the key factors that work their way into, I guess, the mindset of buyers in terms of things they can't control. And all those things are, if anything, positive in the marketplace. So, what are we worried about? That demand side is certainly still churning ahead of of supply in that medium to longer term.